Welcome to another episode of Spotlight. On today's programme, we've got Mark Wakefield, who's going to be talking to us about setting up a business post-redundancy and the challenges this has had on his mental health and how he's gained in resilience. You got made redundant, you started a business. Why? Why did you make that decision?
Yeah, so when I found out I was getting made redundant, it was a big shock. And I tried to figure out how I could use my experience from the last 20 years to move myself forwards, and figuring out all the things that I'd learned, how to make things better for people that are applying for mortgages. And we thought that we could do that and create something really special.
You've been man enough to start your own business, and obviously it's not easy. So
no, it's not.
It's not easy.
No,
and it's like, I think as well, like, it isn't easy, and it's funny because obviously we saw you at the very start as well, like been on this bit, like all of it with you really. It is interesting that everybody starts with that rose tinted glass.
I think a bit naive.
Yeah, naive. Yeah, naive's naive's definitely the right word, in like a non-naive way.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Because I think the thing was, everybody said this is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
And I think there was part of me that thought, well, I've done this for 20 years anyway, so I know what I'm doing from a mortgage point of view, and yeah, I'll just learn the other bits in and around it. But I think I severely underestimated how much there was to learn that wasn't just selling mortgages, like the marketing side of things, and even just setting up networking groups, and some of the really boring things like where to buy certain things from, like you need like stationery and things. It's just having to learn everything. It's just been a complete well, I just underestimated how tough it was going to be.
Do you think that it's because your profession is mortgages and you were good at that?
Yeah.
And therefore you naturally wanted to try and transfer that into a business? You're good at your profession, and I think the naivety...
Well, not a business owner.
Yeah, I think the naivety is all the other bits, which you just... There is no preparation for that.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, I mean, I never managed a cash flow or...
Yeah.
Anything like that.
Setting up a CRM.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bit of...
web design.
What to put on the website.
Yeah.
Social media, there's just a whole load of things that you just never even thought about. And it comes as a shock. And it just feels like there's a million different problems every day that you've got to try and overcome.
I think it's not like the mentality shift, especially in like that early period where you go from like the security of work into like working for yourself, working on your business. That's difficult, isn't it? That first couple of months where you're like, we're not getting paid anymore.
Oh, I can remember in January getting my last paycheck, and just the shock of it, because it's suddenly you realise that other people around me that were getting made redundant at the same time as me were going and getting other jobs and moving from a steady income to another steady income, and it felt like I was the only one that had made a decision. I'm deliberately not going to go and get a steady income. I'm just going to go and do my own thing, and it was really scary.
I've still got my paycheck on my desk. I've got the last paycheck on my desk.
Yeah, the P45 coming through was the
that moment of,
because you truly feel like, okay, this is it, I'm on my own now.
You do, yeah. And that after 20 years, I mean, obviously I wasn't quite 20 years, but it was what, I worked for like 10? 10? Living 10? Yeah, it would have been 8 years, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It is a shock. Like.
But yeah, and I think it really hits home after a while that you're only accountable to yourself. There's no one else to fall back on. If you want to try things and you make mistakes, it's on you, and you just have to learn from it and try and pick yourself up and get on with it.
What was the dream versus what is actually the reality?
Well, the dream is to make a successful business, but and I knew along the way, like I said, I knew it would be tough at the start, But I kind of thought there'd be like a steady, like as your knowledge grew and you become settled in what you're doing, that there'd be a gradual becoming more confident, more comfortable in your own sort of skin as a business owner, and you gradually get better over time. The reality is that one day you feel fantastic, and you think, yeah, I've learned from that last mistake, and I know what I'm doing now, and I'll just keep moving forward. But then the next day, something that you didn't even know was going to blindside you, and you feel back down again. And it's almost like you feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes, or 2 steps forward, 2 steps back sometimes. Yeah, that's the reality of it. It's not that nice sort of uptick in like confidence, knowledge, or growth, or any of those things. You just feel like it's up and down the whole time.
Obviously, sort of half a year or so in.
Yeah.
What would you do differently?
I would probably listen to people and their advice more. I think coming into it, there's that element that you hear what people are saying and how difficult it's going to be, but you're still in that dream phase that you don't know what the reality is going to be like, and you kind of you hear it but think, yeah, mine won't necessarily be like that, my experience. And I think if I was starting again now, I would listen to those people and act on it rather than just hearing it, and do some of the things that they were suggesting sooner.
Obviously, like thinking about your mental health, the starting a business is probably one of the biggest challenges that you can actually put upon your mental health. How would you say that starting a business has affected yours?
It really has, because there are some days where you think, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. And before, when you again you're in those employed roles, there was people all around you that could help with certain situations, or that was their speciality. Doing this, the book stops with you, and so yeah, it really has. But what I've got is 2 really good business partners, and usually, if you're having one of those days where you think you sort of hitting a brick wall, there's usually one of those you can turn to, or both of them, to say, okay, well, this is what's going on with me today, and yeah, they're really good at. We're really good at supporting each other and getting ourselves through that. But it is really difficult to keep going sometimes.
Would you say that it's an anxiety as opposed to a depression? Would you say it's made you anxious? Would you say at times it's made you depressed?
A bit of everything. I think more anxious than depressed, but it's that feeling that if you make the wrong call or the wrong decision and the business isn't going to work, then that's on you. And I think that builds that anxiety, because I think one of the things that you do need as well is patience, because things don't happen overnight. So you have to sort of be patient and realise that if you make a change and make a decision that you want to do something in a certain way, it's going to take time for the benefit of that to come through. And I think the anxiety comes in where you do those changes and you're not quite sure if it's going to work or not, and you're always looking for signs that it is going to work.
I call it anxiety patience.
Right.
Because I find patience to be quite an anxious thing anyway.
Yeah.
You don't actually have any choice in this capacity, which leads to that feeling of anxiousness.
Well, it's like I was saying about listening to people, because one of the things that a lot of people did say is you need to have faith, like in yourself and the decisions that you're making, and see it through. And I'm not the most patient of people anyway. And like you say, you put something in place and think, oh, this is going to work, and then I'm like 2 days later thinking, well, why isn't it working?
Yeah.
In reality, it could take months or years sometimes.
We have mentioned learning all the way through. What have you learned about yourself?
That I don't have all the answers. I think that going into it, like I say, I've learned a lot over the last 20 years, and I knew the things that would make the difference to customers' lives and make things easier for them. But I thought anything that came across that I wasn't quite sure about, I'd be able to sort of learn as I went. And I think I've realised that, sometimes it's okay to say, I just don't know how to deal with that situation or what to do with this part of the business, and to ask for help.
Do you you think have you got any sort of specific qualities that you would say that you've gained?
Resilience, but I think that thinking outside the box sometimes, and probably being a bit more entrepreneurial, and rather than saying, okay, we're going to try this idea, we've got this new product that we want to try. If it doesn't quite work or land properly, being able to adjust and be a bit more flexible, that's really, something that I wouldn't have done in the past. It would have been set to plan and we'll see the plan through. And I think I've learned it's probably best to not be that rigid within the plan, but flexible as things evolve and go through and learn from, how things have worked day to day.
So what would you say has been the most rewarding thing? Are there any?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I always think doing the job that we do anyway is rewarding, because I honestly think being able to help someone buy a house or their home is a real privilege, and that in itself is really rewarding. And I think what I found rewarding in the business so far is we've found people that other mortgage brokers have said are unhelpable. Nothing can be done. It is what it is, and through, just because we really want to help people, but because we can be flexible and nimble and probably put in more groundwork and research, we're really able to help the people that have been told that they couldn't get help, and that in itself is really rewarding. It makes you realise why you're actually doing what you're doing.
Thinking about like when it is tough, because it is tough, there's no getting away from it, it's tough. Like, what are you using to keep yourself going, keep yourself motivated?
My family, because ultimately, even when I was working, I only ever did it to support my family and give them a good standard of living, and certainly with my kids, allow them, give them the best possible start that I could and allow them to reach their dreams. But also, for even when I was employed for a long time, I've wanted to own a business, just because having that level of control and sense of you're in charge of your own destiny. So I just try to think of how things might be in the future if things go well, or you make the right decisions, make the right calls, how things could be, and I try and just draw on that. That if I can get the business to a place where it's supporting us, we've got happy customers, but we're also able to employ people and support them and their families as well. I think that's where I want to be. That's where I want to be in the future.
So you've got quite a clear, defined dream, and you're motivated by chasing.
Yeah, one of the big milestones is to take people on and support them, and I think that I'll see that probably over the next few years. But I try and just think that.
Thinking about when you have wanted to quit, have you sort of overcome? How do you overcome it?
Yeah,
because we all want to quit. There's no entrepreneur out there that hasn't wanted to quit.
There's always that little part in your brain that says you can't do this, and you're missing something. You're not good enough to do it. And I think when things, because things do go wrong, and they're going to go wrong, in a multitude of different ways. But I think what you've got to do is try not to react to it. If you're feeling like, okay, well, I just can't carry on with this situation, then the best thing I've found is just talking to people about it, because you very often find that, something happened to us last week with a mortgage case that went completely belly up after weeks and weeks of work, and you blame yourself for it. It's actually a natural instinct that there's something I could have done differently that would have stopped that happening. But very often when you sit there and break it down, there was nothing I could have done. It was just one of those things, and sometimes you just have to realise that this is just part of the journey, which is very easy for me to sit here and say now, but when you're in the moment, and I think the thing is just to realise that you are in the moment sometimes when you're feeling like that, and to give yourself a bit of time.
What advice would you give somebody starting a business other than don't do it?
I'd probably say and you just think very carefully if it's for you. And this is probably, you know, that thing I was saying about listening to people and what they're saying, because, like I said, people told me it was going to be tough, and I sort of thought, well, I could probably do it, you know, anyway. But it is really tough, and you need to really be prepared and have a good support mechanism around you, the support process, because you will hit a wall at some point where you wonder whether you can do it or not, and you need people around you that can support you and that can help you through that, because it's very tough to do it on your own.
Do you think that because you were good at your profession, that when you were hearing that advice at the start, but because obviously that probably pretty exceptional at your profession, and you all three of you quite senior in what you did it a long time, so obviously excellent at your job.
Yeah.
And then do you think that we talked about the naivety before? Do you think that like the naivety was, well, I'm really good at my job?
For sure.
Yeah.
There was that element that, you know, within the world that I was working in, I was the go-to person for a lot of things. If somebody didn't know somebody how to do something, it would be like, okay, call Mark. So yeah, I think coming out of that environment, I thought that I would have the answers. And so these people that are telling me it's going to be tough, I already know the answers because I've been doing it. But what they're trying to say to you is it's not the profession part, the mortgage part or the insurance part that you need to worry about. It's the, you know, attracting clients, setting things up that you've never even thought about, dealing with an accountant, all these little things that sound quite trivial, but when you mount them up in the early days and everything's like you need to get something done now, it all stacks up. So yeah, I would. You need to plan it out. You really do, and I didn't plan it out enough, and I thought I did. You need to back yourself.
Yeah, I think if you go into a business that you've come from doing as a profession, I can see how that could be a pitfall actually straight away. Whereas I went back to a love. I'd left advertising and marketing because of burnout, and I'd forgotten how much I loved it. Yeah. And then when the time came to me to start to do this, I was just going back to something that I'd done and had to relearn. Like the job I was doing, I could have done it with my eyes closed. You know what I mean? So that was an interesting differentiation between like you going in to do something that you had experience in, and I can probably see actually now from talking to you today how you could not necessarily take everyone as seriously as you probably would do now in that situation because you're so good at your job. And like 20 years then into running a business. What would you say to your 16-year-old self?
Believe in yourself more, and don't let people write you off. You know, if you feel like you can achieve something and do something, then try and do it. And I think part of the problem that I've, you know, of working through my career and being made redundant, if I could go back and redo that, I probably wouldn't have stayed within that role so long. Yeah. I became too comfortable, and after a certain period of time, you stop growing and stop, you know, your own personal growth. And I think that, I'll just believe in yourself more, that you can actually go. You don't have to rely on an employer to go out and earn a living, help people, and feel like you're achieving something in life. You can do it for yourself.
Goals/dreams. Yes. What are your dreams for the business, and what are your personal goals for yourself?
So my dream for the business is that over the next 2 or 3 years that we can continue growing, so that not only are we sort of self-sufficient, but we're also able to take on people and grow and help, you know, train other, almost like, it sounds really cheesy, but the next generation of people to do the job properly, and help more customers that way. I'd like to get to a point where, you know, 20 years down the line, I can step away from it completely, and it's a big enough entity to keep going.
Personal goals for you?
I need to continue working on myself, so that whole resilience, believing in yourself probably a bit more, and not beating yourself up so much when things don't go right. Realising that you're not infallible, that you will make mistakes, and things won't always go right, and how you deal with that.
That concludes another episode of Spotlight. On today's programme, we had Mark Wakefield. It was a really interesting chat to see how he transitioned from being a very competent professional over a 20-year career into having to find resilience from day one of setting up his own business, doing the same thing but working for himself.